You know when you see something so good, so incredibly well.
Is this what you wanted? Is this what you wanted? They're all gonna laugh at you. Is this what you wanted? You don't give the Is this what you wanted?
Is this what you wanted?
Is this what you wanted?
Well thought out that immediately after you first view it, you must watch it again just to take in everything necessary to truly appreciate it. The last time that happened to me was Twin Peaks: The Return Part 8, followed closely, but not as completely on the same level as that, was Raised by Wolves a few months ago. If you guys don't watch Raised by Wolves, you totally should, because it hits the same sort of mysterious itch The Nevers does, and is also on HBO Max, and may just help you get through the next period of uncertainty and doubt about when we will see the rest of this series. This week's episode was directed by Zetna Fuentes, who I am unfamiliar with, but was exceptionally impressed with their work this week, and our very own Jane Espenson wrote it. Now, you can all imagine my surprise when I found out that Jane wrote the episode, but then it did make sense with all the things I said about her in my breakdown for episode 2. I was worried we were going to get a bad version of
The Espenson Effect
this time, but nah. It was actually all good ways she normally Espensonifies her work. The episode opens with an extremely jarring shot of a spaceship flying through a decimated landscape as a few skydivers fall from it. So me, my boyfriend, and my roommate were all sitting around waiting for the episode to begin and just sitting there discussing our theories like good little watchers do. You know, aliens, interdimensional beings, is true from the future, is she aware of the future, and other theories that now seem obscenely small in comparison to this first shot alone. Immediately, 1, 2, 3, all our jaws hit the floor at the exact same time, and from that moment onwards, I sat completely forward on the couch, pretty much in tears at what I was watching. Yes, I am dramatic. Come at me. This is not the first time a show from the mind of Joss Whedon throws you into the future unexpectedly, and for those of you that are as much of a fan as I am referring to, of course, the Dollhouse Season 1 finale. Originally starting as a way to fill the 13th episode order when the agreement with Fox was for 12 episodes, and then randomly saying they wanted a 13th episode made with half the budget.
Is this what you wanted?
Originally, Fox suggested a best of or season recap for the final episode of the season, and Joss, rightfully so, was offended with the idea, thinking it was a cheap way to fill time in a show. And he was right. Then he was given the death blow that the 13th episode would only be released on DVD and not air on television at all. How is he supposed to make an episode that didn't add anything new but wasn't a highlight reel of the season, while still being a gift to those that purchased the season on DVD and expanding on the world? Well, he came up with the episode Epitaph 1, and while being done for half the budget of the previous episodes, it appears to look even more expensive than any episodes that came before it.
Is this what you wanted?
Since the story with Epitaph 1 came from a place of constraint and problem solving, it seems natural that his next large TV project would incorporate the same elements of randomly throwing the audience into the future, now that I think about it. However, it was planned from the beginning this time and seated in the audience's subconscious from the first 10 minutes of the pilot, if you ask me. And in regards to all those viewers complaining this came out of nowhere, I can't help but ask, how did you manage to keep up with the subtext that the show gives you up until this point? This was always here. There are so many hints to it. First question, where and when does this take place? It's the future, yeah, but is it the distant future? And how distant is it? Is it Earth? Is it another planet? Does Earth still exist?
Are any of us truly alive unless we try Kellogg's brand cornflakes?
I've heard some people suggest that this is actually future London, and I like that, especially because we get the Edinburgh line, but it's not necessarily confirmed because, it's kind of like you can have one Earth and then name another Earth after the same names. We hear what the soldiers refer to as a crier, and I assume that is like an automated message sent from a ship overhead that is telling people to stand down, give up their blasphemous fight, and join the Free Life Army. As a member and soldier of Free Life catch up with the soldiers looking for something close by, a previously dead or possuming soldier wakes up and shoots back before vomiting up blue crystals. The soldiers we entered the scene with announce themselves to be PDC and take the Free Life man hostage.
Chapter 1. Stripe.
Okay, so at this point, I have to... Okay, wait. That is so fucking good! Fuck! Okay, now that we got that out of the way.
Is this what you wanted?
We enter full-on chapter mode for this episode, and I've seen the chapter format used a lot recently, and it's not always for the best, or sometimes it's just pointless, but before we even get to the end of the episode, it is done right here, and it is necessary, and I'll destroy you if you don't have the brain power to get into this shit, because TV needs more of this right here. Stupid audiences keep me from enjoying good TV every single time. I also need to comment that throughout the previous segment, we have moments with words like boot, second boot, free life, PDC, possuming, pride, etc. These are all words we haven't heard and, again, is something common in Joss's work. This episode being written by Jane Espenson, it makes sense that she uses the same techniques. Again, we see this technique in Dollhouse, but also in Joss's little-known comic called Frey, which is in the same universe as Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and tells the story of a Slayer many, many, many years in the future. Manhattan has been shortened to Hatton, Jesus to Jisoo, and Vampire has become Lurker. Through the power of deduction and context, we learn what these words mean, as the people living in the world wouldn't be explaining them to each other since they all speak the same language. I mean, imagine being born 50 years ago and suddenly having to have a conversation IRL with someone and you're all LOL, LMFAO, JKBRB girl. It works. And it's right. And it's good. The show managed to have a lot of subtext going on in the past 5 episodes, and if you weren't quick to the punch, you'd kind of be left behind in regards to certain characters' motivations and histories, so they subconsciously get the audience thinking in the proper way to digest this episode. The PDC and hostage enter a bunker, sort of science building of sorts. They test the air, deeming it safe, and take off the masks that they've been wearing, so the air outside is no longer breathable for humans. Noted. However, True is outside with no mask on, and this leads me to believe that, since she was on the planet when it started, that people on the ground can breathe in the air, but it might cause disease of some sort. We do not know if the people from the PDC are from this planet originally, or flew from somewhere else on the planet and used precaution with masks, or if they actually can't breathe in the air. Maybe only this specific section of the planet, the city it looks like, is unsafe to breathe in? Maybe? One of the soldiers says they can't tap into the OS of the building with Big Rex, so they have to use Little Rex. Free Life Hostage mentions that the PDC creates AI but forgets the I. So more and more through these conversations, we can deduce that Free Life and PDC are on opposite sides of the war. A religious war, kind of, because the word blasphemous was used earlier. We can also assume that the PDC uses technology, while Free Life maybe doesn't. Now, I am not a costumer or know much about the history of clothing, but doesn't the Free Life Hostage jacket look to be from the Victorian or just another sort of era? Maybe they're like the futuristic equivalent of the Amish today and refuse to use advanced technology like their PDC others do. By the way, this will be answered in ways as we move on, but I'm going scene by scene with each question and its potential answer. One of the soldiers mentions that the systems that Free Life uses clone the OS of the PDC, so nah, not Amish. Little Rex is just a small version of a Roomba that seems to be used to break into security systems, and he's very, very cute. They ask what the Free Life hostage is doing here, and he tells them he was tracking the spatial anomaly, same as them. The PDC officer mentions it was Free Life that tagged this place to begin with, to which the hostage says he doesn't know if they got inside or what happened to them. He asks for their names, and Second Boot says, their names are sacred, shitto, and it's something he should know. This explains why the characters are referring to each other as Boot, Second Boot, and Crescent, using the power of
deduction and critical thinking.
I have come to assume these are names associated with their specific job in the army. Unclear how it would work exactly with civilians. The hostage introduces himself as Major Johnson William Greenborn, so he apparently doesn't mind letting them all know his name, which, by the way, the names in this show and this episode are quite fracking awesome. He says the name Free Life doesn't hide from God like you PDC dogs before Second Boot tapes his mouth shut. Boot gets on the comms or communications radio and announces their presence in the facility as the others look around for what they are assuming will be Free Life soldiers already there waiting for them. Knitter, one of the PDC soldiers, asks what a Stripe is doing here alone. So normally Stripes wouldn't be alone and they had no idea that one was currently here. Cool. They discuss that when they found her that they thought she was dead because she had swallowed coolant pods, what we saw her vomiting up earlier, in order to appear dead, or possuming, and not give off heat to reveal her totally not dead but alive status. Little Rex, who is adorable, manages to turn the lights on in the facility. Go Little Rex. Knitter questions Stripe about swallowing the coolant pods and tells her to relax as the change in body heat can shred organs. Is your stomach coated? She asks. We can assume that in order to appear as dead for as long as Stripe has been, you have to coat your stomach with something to prevent this from happening, and she nods, telling us she did this. Stripe asks Knitter for Fiend, which she says she can't give her. Fiend, morphine, drugs. Got it? Me too. Good. If she takes drugs and becomes zoned, her body will level out. Stripe is annoyed. Remember that time that Amalia was so willing, ready, and able to suck in the opium with penance? Well, there you go, y'all. It wasn't there before, bullshitters. By the way, we are only 5 minutes into this episode, including the recap, so really 3.5, and I already have written 2 pages on what this episode did to my brain as I watched it. The little robot Rex manages to download schematics for the building. Stripe mentions she didn't find anyone else, and the group deduces they are alone in the facility. One of the soldiers mentions Stripe hasn't called colors, and they ask her, what's her pride, and she says 41st Ground out of Edinburgh. In other words, it's basic protocol for a Stripe to let the other soldiers know what group she is with, aka her pride, like a pride of lions. They tell her that it's odd that she says she's from Edinburgh, as no one got out of Edinburgh. Stripe says 3 did, but 2 of them died on the walk down. The other soldiers mention who they are with, but their Stripe died, and asks if her mission will fit theirs. And Knitter very adamantly says she needs to get her leveled from the coolant pods before she can give orders to anything. So Stripes are like a lieutenant, I'm thinking, or like major officer in the army, or just like a leader in the army, and I'm assuming usually 1 per battalion. They tell Knitter to take Stripe back to sickbay and get her fixed up, as well as to take the bullet out of Knitter's own leg. They mention they think it's wild that Stripe possumed and used coolant pods in the cold outside, and they've never seen anyone do that before. Stripe said she had no other option as a group of 20 Free Life members dropped down an hour before their group arrived. The scanner said only 8 were there, though, to which Stripe said she had an hour, insinuating she took out almost the entire squadron herself. At this point, I was pretty sure that this was true, but I was still a little bit hesitant to make that call, but I can say this line tells me so much on my 3rd rewatch, because we know True is a bad ass, and she is a bad ass. Then I instantly knew that this was true because we see a shot of her taking meds of some sort and doing the dun 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 finger anxiety twitching thing True does. It absolutely blows my goddamn mind that this little thing was probably introduced to True's character to make this moment work. But I never felt like True's finger thing was randomly placed in there or wasn't used right until this moment at all. It's so natural and tells us exactly what we need to know and probably could have deduced with no words yet again. It reminds me of how Buffy the Vampire Slayer sets up the Buffy Faith body swap in Season 4 by having Faith say 5 by 5 twice in the episode before it happens, and a 3rd time when Willow and Tara are discussing it.
Check me out, I'm wicked cool, I'm 5 by 5. 5 by 5? 5 what by 5 what? See, that's the thing, no one knows.
Really drawing attention to the character quirk of saying 5 by 5 by asking to explain what it means and making it a joke. 5 by 5 is then said by Sarah Michelle Gellar after it was hammered home that it was something only Faith said as a sort of tagline, and that is how the reveal of the episode works at the end.
5 by 5.
There is no moment where the characters say, "We swapped bodies," or "That's what that device does," or even visually shows us by maybe showing Faith in the mirror when Buffy looks into it or something like that. We get it all because of the way the show and episode marinates the viewer in tools they need to keep up with the surprises of the story. Knitter is in the medical bay with Stripe and asks something I found really interesting. Knitter is concerned with the amount of body coolant Stripe had to take to possum and says it was less playing dead and more practicing dead. She then asks what her PITSID levels are, to which Stripe says too high to make Crescent and too high to go home. Stripe also says that almost everyone has PITSID, and Knitter asks if she's been having flashbacks. PITSID quite possibly means PTSD. Flashbacks like war flashbacks, and since Knitter is concerned with Stripe's ability to take over as their Stripe for the duration of this mission, she is checking to make sure that Stripe is mentally sound. I'm assuming they have a way to measure PITSID, PTSD, or since we learn later in a few scenes that they use simulations for torture as well as recreationally, PTSD in this version of the future might have something to do with the effects on the brain simulations of this type have. It's a little unclear. Knitter asks Stripe to help take the bullet out of her leg, and she obliges. Knitter asks if she wants to know what the mission is for the team, and Stripe says, "You're looking for a Galanthe." And oh my god, yes! Okay, good, I am watching the right show, and HBO didn't upload something wrong. Yay! Knitter asks Stripe's name. Stripe says that's very forward and that she was married for 3 years to 2 different people with children and never even told any of them. Stripe doesn't necessarily believe Knitter's team is here because they saw a spatial anomaly, which means a portal, which is how the Galanthe originally came here, but because Knitter's command saw a free life beacon, freaked out, and sent in Knitter's team, specifically including Knitter because she is spored. Knitter says the correct term is empathically enhance and explains that spore is frickin' rude. The spores are translators that activate parts of the human mind to make them understand Galanthe language and technology. Knitter mentions that she can't do those things and has never seen a Galanthe in her life. It is quite apparent she received the empathy enhancement, though, based on the way Stripe responds to her questions by insinuating the only reason she's concerned with matters at all is because she is spored. Stripe takes a peek at a display case inside the med bay and questions what the guys that made this place were building. We see a case filled with True's umbrella, butterfly collections, gloves, and other artifacts from the Victorian era. Now, this here has really racked my brain. And when I get the full picture at the end of the episode, I think the reason these artifacts were here becomes a little bit more apparent. So I'll get to that when we finish the rundown. Now, this here has really racked my brain. And when I get the full picture at the end of this episode, I think the reason these artifacts were here becomes a little bit more apparent, so I'll get to that when we finish the rundown. Stick around. Stripe identifies where the artifacts are from, and cheekily mentions she wasn't always a soldier, and that's how she knows. Inside the case is a pack of sim strips, or simulation strips, in binders. Knitter says they should give them to a team member because he lives in Sims. This is also how we find out that these sim strips are also used for recreational purposes, because it's implied that you can use them for porn, among many other things they're used for that are mentioned throughout this sequence. Great world building happens here when Stripe mentions that she hopes the guy they're giving the Sims to isn't virgin and believes flesh is evil, which is why he would use the Sims for sex. Virgin? Like a religious person that's abstinent, maybe? I don't know exactly. It could also be a planet of some sorts, or where they all hail from, but I think my guess there is pretty accurate. Ultimately, it's unimportant, and we'll probably never know, but this little attention to detail made my tummy tickle. It's unneeded, but adds to the world around these characters. Stripe says this particular Galanthe project is different, as most of them are huge and much larger than the building they are currently in, and begins to question what this team was doing here with this one. Knitter mentions all other Galanthe projects don't exist anymore, as Free Life bombed every single one of them. Stripe is somewhat shocked and questions if all of them were destroyed, as there was 20 of them? Knitter says she doesn't know how many of them are still alive still, and guesses maybe 1, possibly more, as Command didn't even know about this particular Galanthe until recently. The team calls for Stripe when they discover something that frightens them. Stripe says to get the other team members and to be quiet as to not wake this thing up. She smiles to herself, and I love that moment, and I absolutely love this scene right here, actually. She turns on the light in the room in front of her to reveal a large indoor tomato farm, and she immediately picks one to eat. Knitter spots what Stripe was doing, and as the power to the building turns on completely and lightens up the room, they share a smile before Stripe takes a bite, her eyes welling with tears as she turns sideways away from Knitter and enjoys the bite from the fruit. Just this small moment says so much. She turns away from someone to almost not share the weakness of eating fruit and God knows how long from her face. The music, acting, and everything tells you everything you need to know about how that apple makes Stripe feel, and we immediately know that food like this probably hasn't been seen for a long, long time. But no longer than Stripe has been alive, as she knows what it is, while the younger soldiers were obviously scared of it. Knitter calms the group down when they return. They comment that the room looks like something out of a farmer's daughter sim, insinuating they've only seen something similar in a simulation and possibly recreationally or for their training. Stripe finds a door behind the garden, and they mentioned it wasn't included in the schematic. Inside is an elevator shaft of sorts. We find out later this leads to where the Galanthe is being housed, and we pan up to reveal a group of bodies dangling from the ground, dripping blood beneath them. And I had immediate flashbacks to that episode of Firefly where they find the ship that's decimated by reavers and they're all hung up on a string, all their bodies. Exactly that. They assume Free Life killed the science team hanging above the shaft, but mention it's strange that Free Life would hang the bodies like this as they don't normally hide their kills and clean up after themselves in such a way. Stripe deduces the group hanging was hiding whatever is below them. The group finds a door leading to an even lower level than before and enter it together. When the power is brought back to this bottom section, we see a Galanthe inside a ball quite similar to the one we've seen in the Victorian era, sans the glowing blue light. The team jumps and they are all on edge, knowing immediately that this ball houses a Galanthe. They comment a bit on the human blood pooling from above into the Galanthe container and are shocked when it opens its fucking eye. And when I tell you, I, as well, was so taken back from this shot. I knew the Galanthe was going to be some sort of alien, higher dimensional being thing, but when I saw a freaking eye open inside the container, I freaked out. I didn't expect it to really have a body or a physical form, let alone a goddamn eye, so closely resembling an animal from Earth. Stripe tells them all not to shoot as the glass is fat glass and the bullets will bounce back off it. Suddenly, a blue light, like the ones we've seen in the ball in the Victorian era, and the same colored light as the spores from the first episode coming off the ship, extends like octopus tentacles from the Galanthe towards the humans in front of it. They all watch in awe, but once it gets closer, they get scared, shoot their guns, and one hits Stripe in the arm after bouncing off the glass. Very quickly, we are treated to one of these flashbacks of Stripes from the pit Sid mentioned earlier, and we see her being drowned in battle by another soldier wearing a gas mask until we are immediately transferred back to her medicating herself in the current time. Major Johnson William Greenborn tells the group that a Free Life group did manage to find this place but didn't have the firepower to kill a Galanthe, so they improvised, set off the beacon, and let everyone hear. As the group argues about what to do and why the Galanthe is in that state, Stripe says it's because they wanted to torture it. Kill the ones taking care of the Galanthe, the ones closest to it, the ones it would consider family, and kill them in front of it. It's one of the basic rules of torture: kill the family first. It's about the absence of hope. And believe you me, hope is repeated over and over again in this episode. There is a quite interesting theory you can find on Reddit that I will link in the description below that goes into the history of the Galanthe flower and how it symbolizes hope in a few different cultures. It's a very interesting read. Go check it out. Johnson Greenborn tells the group he's called for backup the moment they met resistance, and in order to call it off, as they will all die in the attack, they should just kill the Galanthe, thus closing the portal, and tell the world that it's ended. Knitter finally gives Stripe the morphine she wanted and asks her for a favor to save the Galanthe. Stripe is confused and asks why the portal didn't close once the Galanthe came through it, and Knitter says that normally happens, but this portal happens to be stable. Knitter thinks that more Galanthe are trying to get through, that the 20 that came earlier were just scouts of sorts, and this team in the science facility was helping this single Galanthe build the portal to allow them through. Crescent checks out some files on the computer and sees a very intriguing video of a scientist discussing the behavior of the Galanthe, and it's the first time we see one in its full glory. Firstly, I kind of love the design of the Galanthe, particularly the little fin on top of its forehead and the overall way it moves like a sea creature on land. We learn through this video that the science team in this facility did have a good relationship with the Galanthe. We see it nudging and cuddling the doctor, trying to give the report on its behavior, even mentioning they're much more playful and friendly than they could have anticipated. I am on a mission to find and create a Galanthe plushie toy now, specifically so I can give it to Kay on Twitter. Major Greenborn has a private moment with one of the soldiers that already gives off the vibe that he will change sides from the moment we meet him, and questions his decision to be a part of the PDC. Greenborn scares him by insinuating thousands of Galanthe came in through that portal and plants the seed that this soldier's commanding officer can't make the call to kill the Galanthe. Someone is going to have to. Stripe and Knitter are discussing ways to get the Galanthe out of this situation, and Knitter suggests moving it, to which Stripe says they can't do that. A static storm is coming, and any kinetic movement makes your muscles explode until it goes away. Sounds like fun. Knitter is frustrated that Stripe isn't saying anything of value to help the situation and figure out how to save the Galanthe, and tries to convince her that they will be saving the world and that they are so close to doing so if they manage to save this Galanthe. Knitter says the Galanthe can make the famine, floods, and kinetic storms stop, and Stripe is unconvinced, as no Galanthe seem to be coming through the stable portal to help them as it stands now. Knitter says they're probably not ready yet, or getting ready to, and Stripe says, what about the 5 million people your great brainosaurs were too late to save? So this brings up a very interesting question I have that's not really addressed in this episode, but it is super, super intriguing. If the Galanthe, as we can assume, are an alien race of beings that come to a species and spore them to help with their development and stop wars that are raging on planets between them, then at what point do they come? How many civilizations have they tried to help? Stripe mentions 5 million people died, and then the Galanthes showed up. So do they only come after a call of some sort? Are they drawn to civilizations without hope and are then driven to come give them hope? It would tie in with the reason for the sporing, but it's something we don't learn in this episode. I am inclined to believe that the Galanthe are in fact drawn to species that need help, but only at their lowest moments, not before. I will expand on this towards the end of the video. Knitter just says the Galanthe aren't gods, and Stripe snaps back saying then she needs to stop praying to them like they are. There is a rumble, and the power goes out for a minute, and the two embrace. Did anybody else pick up the sexual tension here? Because if you ask me, there was a lot. And when we get to the end of this chapter, I will explain probably why that's there. Knitter asks Stripe to do one thing for her. Can she just hope that they make it right? There it is again. Hope. Stripe is like, hell nah, you can't ask me that, and Knitter says she can fight, but it needs to be for a purpose. It's pretty easily deduced that since Knitter is spored and more empathetic than people around her, that she actually physically needs the hope around her to actually keep going, or it truly damages her mental state in the situation. This isn't just someone asking another person to hope and keep fighting, it's someone asking someone else to please hope, as then there is no purpose for their existence of being alive. Stripe says she's not going to die here waiting for a savior because the PDC and what they fight for always just comes barely close to success. Just barely. She says Free Life owns history. It's always the man who has the club. Teehee. Our first reference to history and time on this sort of level. And Knitter says that's not true. Stripe says of course it isn't because she's spored, and Knitter says no, it's because she used to be Free Life, but changed once she was touched from the Galanthe. It didn't make her brainwashed or a slave to the Galanthe, but made her question. So yes, she hopes. This stops Stripe in her tracks, and they share a moment looking at each other. The two hear gunfire coming from the Galanthe room and end their moment to go join. Greenborn had killed the soldier he was with, and now has the others at gunpoint. They're trying to tell the man that the rift is stable because the Galanthe aren't coming here, but the one stuck inside the containment is attempting to leave. They tell him Free Life won and got what they wanted. Stripe shoots Greenborn, and Knitter walks slowly to the Galanthe in a scene that is truly heartbreaking. She stands there begging to know why the Galanthe is leaving, why her god has lost all hope in her species. Knitter is destroyed emotionally. Everything she felt she was fighting for was a lie, and at that moment all her hope is crushed, and she's shot in the chest. What an awful way to die, thinking your god has abandoned all hope in your species, and that there truly is no hope for your existence, your purpose, and you're gonna lose, and your civilization will be destroyed. Now that I realize this stupid soldier that shot Knitter is called Boot, he reveals that he's been possuming just like Stripe in the beginning as he enters the room with his gun. Stripe takes him out and runs over to Knitter. Crescent, the soldier we know like Sims, is bleeding out on the floor, and we see him put 2 white platelets on either side of his head in order to deal with the pain. We see him going into a simulation to distract his mind from the physical pain. In a scene that really got me, and after only knowing this character Knitter for about 20 minutes, she bleeds out and dies on the floor as she's questioning why the Galanthe has decided to leave. They gave up, leaving the human race to die in its own filth. Stripe lies to her and tells her the Galanthe is just going back for help and coming back with more to make her death less pointless in her own eyes. Stripe tells her that she believes there is hope and that the Galanthe will help them all. In a very gentle, humbling moment, Stripe asks gently for Knitter's name, and as she dies, she tries to say it but is unable to finish. If you watch this episode with subtitles, Knitter's name starts with H, and that's all we really get. So real quickly, originally I immediately thought this was Harriet, or she was going to say Harriet, which of course might also imply aspects of these characters' personalities came back with the Galanthe when we see what the Galanthe does in a few moments. But then I thought a bit harder about it. Harriet and Knitter obviously look alike, and I think this might be a throw-off red herring to the audience, as we also know there were 2 other characters with H names, Hugo Swan and Horatio. I am more inclined to think Horatio and Knitter are closer connected than Harriet and Knitter, as Knitter was obviously a doctor of sorts, and Stripe and Knitter had that very comfy sexual tension moment briefly when the power went out earlier. What do you guys all think? After rewatching this moment a bunch of times, I am more inclined to think that her mouth was making an H-O type sound rather than an H-A. Stripe softly and quietly makes her way to the indoor farm as a beautiful score echoes beneath her. Everyone else is dead, she is alone, and she has lost all hope. She sits on the ground facing the farm and drinks poison quickly, intending to kill herself. In an absolutely breathtaking sequence, the Galanthe glowing arms comes through the wall, wraps around Stripe's body as her last exhale of breath happens, and we watch this blue light travel up through the hole in the facility and transform slowly and gently into the shape of the ship we saw at the end of episode 1. This concludes chapter 1. Holy shit. Before we head into chapter 2, I will briefly speak about my theories. So we know the science team was helping the Galanthe escape through the portal and that the ship leads to the Victorian era to spore the others we've come to know as the Touched. But instead of, let's say, escaping to their home planet or somewhere far away from Earth, it was a portal to send it back in time as a last resort. We know they were studying the Victorian era when we see the display case with the artifacts, and we know the science team was building the portal in secret. Maybe this team, when they saw Free Life destroying and killing all the other Galanthe projects to make the world better from the present moment forward, decided as a last resort and failsafe to create a portal that would send the Galanthe back in time to change humanity's development that would ultimately lead to the prevention of this war and destruction of the Earth. Originally, I thought that this might have been an accident, but after a few viewings, I think this was part of the plan, and as we find out in later chapters, there are some slight differences to the way this Galanthe spores the Touched in the past timeline. They will say later that humans aren't really given superpowers when the Galanthe comes, and that's something Stripe has never seen before. So this is either a rogue Galanthe that is just trying something different because of the torture done to it by Free Life, or this was all part of the original plan with the science team and the Galanthe chose Stripe to bring along for the ride because 1, she knows the future, and 2, convinced Knitter there was hope when there truly was none, and this seems to be the Galanthe's MO. They probably like that Stripe was able to give Knitter hope without having any herself or being spored. It is also interesting when you think about how time is not linear, so if this Galanthe always went back in time, that means that the Galanthe always went back in time, so the future that we were seeing would have been affected by whatever was back in time, since in all timelines, like a book, opening the beginning of the book or opening the ending of the book, they're all happening at the same time. So if you time traveled, you always time traveled, which would insinuate that what we see, the decimated London in the future, will always happen, but who knows?
Chapter 2, Molly.
The second chapter of this episode is so emotional on a rewatch, and it's honestly hard for me to watch multiple times. My heart aches for Molly's story and the way it is presented to the audience with the music and montage type look at this woman's life, and it sends chills up and down my entire body. In 10 short minutes, I understood Molly's life, her decision to kill herself in the first episode, and I think this is the standout moment for me personally in this episode. Immediately, classical music begins to play, and we are introduced to Molly walking down the alleyway that we see her walk down in the first episode of the show. The exact spot we know she is going to kill herself in later at the laundry. Molly is a baker. Haha! She's not a baker from Masson earlier in the season is explained. But Molly is an unusual baker. She's inspired by little French tarts that are out of place in the bakery she works at. The little cakes are shown again as an echo, which is why I think it's important to show this shot of the cakes she makes at the beginning of her storyline. They're perfectly crafted, given a lot of love, and looks just as good as they probably taste. An adorable man named Varnum comes in, talks to Molly about the adorable little cakes. It's clear she has a crush on him, she blushes, and she looks all cute, and she talks to him about the cakes and why she was inspired to make them. Also, just... hold on one second. Laura Donnelly absolutely fucking kills his performance. Her changes in accents are disgustingly good throughout the entire episode, and I love her. She's an immediate icon to me. Oh my god! Phew. Okay, sorry. Varnum is a very sweet man. He's flirting a bit with Molly in an innocent sort of way, and Molly mentions she wants to have a tea room and a family one day. The man who owns the bakery, Thomas, who is quite the disgusting individual, makes sexual innuendos about how Molly's new cakes are too small and you need to charge for bigger since the ladies like it bigger, especially Molly. He's so gross. She's embarrassed and tries to continue her conversation with Varnum, but it's just awkward, and it really hurts my heart to even have to do this write-up because I find this storyline really tragic. Time jumps forward a bit, and the bakery is closing sometime later, and the other woman that works at the bakery is talking to Molly about how her baby is kicking up a storm. She asks Molly if she will say yes. The subtext is the gross man from earlier asks Molly to marry him, and the woman says she needs to stop mooning over Varnum because he doesn't have the money to marry. She then breaks it to Molly that her child will be turning 12 soon, and they'll be able to have her work at the bakery for free and let Molly go, so she should marry someone that has a lot of money to have a good life, since they'll be letting her go and getting free child labor. I totally apologize if I do get a little emotional talking about this sequence. It's hard. We then jump to Molly coming home with her new husband, the owner of the shop next door, in her wedding outfit. They go into his mother's room, Mrs. True, and she seems to be ill and bedridden. Molly's new husband, Thomas, speaks down to her and tells her she's bothered to carry the cake this entire way, so she might as well give it to his mother, and he's super rude to her. His mother says nothing, and throughout this entire sequence, from 3 minutes ago till now, you can see a bright woman turned into a sad, controlled wife almost instantly. The transition here is wild, and it hits me in my soul. She gives the cake to her new mother-in-law, she scarfs it down with no care, chokes on it, and her new husband tells her it's too rich, and she does not like it. We see a quick shot of Molly baking and cooking for her new husband, as well as returning consistently to the alleyway leading to the laundry. The musical score here is just perfect, with the tone and mood of the sequence, with the soft melody of the violin playing over the piano. We see Molly returning to the bakery where the owner's daughter has taken her job. She is now running and delivering rolls to customers for a small pay. A penny, to be exact. In an extremely off-putting scene, and one that, made me want to jump through the screen, Molly's new husband is, making fun of her and complaining she isn't getting well quick enough like she did after the last time she lost the child, telling us this has happened at least twice already. Molly softly just says the next one will take, and goes out to do her delivery job again. God, I want to kill this guy. Then, all of a sudden, Molly's husband has passed away in the sequence, and we learn her husband was in so much debt that now she is stuck with it as a widow and working for small pay delivering rolls for the bakery. Yay. Molly returns yet again to the bakery she used to work at, and Gert tells her she saw Varnum Dale in town the other day. Molly's face slightly lights up as she asks how he is. We learn he got a really good promotion after promotion after promotion, and now he is in charge of the entire office he works at. He stopped his carriage to recognize Gert and say hi and invite both her and Molly to his housewarming. And in the moment that yet again sends a dagger through my heart back to back in this sequence, Gert says she only thanked him for the invite for Molly as Varnum's wife is 7 months pregnant and a barren woman is bad luck in an expectant home. Ugh, fucking kill my heart. She then twists the knife a bit by saying that's the man she should have went after, like she always said. And it's just such a good moment showing the passage of time since she didn't ever say that. She actually told her not to go for Varnum since he had no plans to marry Molly and had no money, adding the pressure that she'd lost her job at the bakery and should marry someone that had some. Of course, Molly is still taking care of her late husband's bedridden mother that probably hates her guts, and the doctor reminds her yet again of her sad, sorrowful life by saying it was a mercy that she didn't have any children since her husband died so early. And then we finally get this moment. The cakes we had originally seen to introduce Molly to us all is now one of the last things she will ever do, and just like we watch this woman's joy and innocence deflate in front of us, we see the cake she originally loved to make just as deflated and destroyed as she is now. She wraps them up gently and leaves them at Varnum's door with the message, "Wishing your family joy." Then we have the moment we all knew was coming. We're back at the alley, and we've seen this before. Molly decides to kill herself. Was this planned? I don't necessarily think so, as the moment she pauses and looks back seems to be the decision moment, but it was probably on her mind before this, and just like that, in a matter of 10 minutes, we are treated to Molly's life, and it's just as sad as we could have figured it would be. Once again, Molly was absent of all hope for her life. Earlier, when she was speaking to the doctor, and many times through this sequence, Molly says, well, God has made our plans for us, and it makes me think of Knitter in Chapter 1, viewing the Galanthe as gods, and her lack of faith when she feels her God has abandoned her, and similarly, Molly feels the same, as one of the last things she is told before we see her kill herself is that God must have written his plans for us well before we started our lives. Again, the absence of hope.
Chapter 3, The Mad Woman in the Thames.
And here comes Stripe. She was pulled from the river, and the moment the ship came over London happened between these two moments, and we see Stripe in Molly's body reacting to being brought to a mental institution, having her first vision of the future and thinking this whole thing is a simulation. Laura Donnelly absolutely kills this moment and being Stripe through and through. This is the first moment we see Sarah, soon to be Malady, as well. She actually is a genuine mental patient in the hospital and asks Molly to play with her. Stripe is attempting to figure out what the rules are in this new world she's woken up in, and after being slapped by the matron welcoming her and telling her to be meek to God and be grateful for being delivered from her sinful act, well, that tells her exactly what she needs to know, and she hits the nurse back and puts up a big fight with the guards until she is eventually subdued in her bed. Sarah greets Molly while she's subdued in her bed and genuinely expresses interest in being Molly's friend. She might be a mental patient, sure, but is genuinely being sweet and is impressed with Molly's ability to slap the matron across the face. The scene is really great because Molly still thinks she's in a simulation, and Free Life is trying to get her to say secrets, including her sacred name, so she is sarcastically saying things like, right, we're gonna be friends, we're gonna tell each other secrets. And eventually she says, a friend is the one you trust to trust you back, which we hear Malady say back to True in episode 2, so obviously it stuck with Sarah way more than it did True, obviously. As it would. After saying she has no secrets to give, True says she's a Stripe. She goes where she goes and does what she's told, but she wasn't told to get anywhere, and she has no mission. Sound familiar from what True has been saying for the last 5 episodes? I think so. This is the moment Stripe realizes she's not actually in a simulation, and when she realizes what her body looks like and that she had killed herself but isn't dead, Sarah holds her as she cries. True is walking through the institution, and the audience overhears two nurses talking about how they couldn't get one woman dry after she came in soaking wet, and we see one woman sitting at a desk making a stamp on the desk fly to her hand and back to its proper place telepathically. Hysterically, Molly chalks it up to the pit sid, and she says she needs Fiend to deal with it. Sarah is sitting with another patient, an older woman, and Sarah is saying she saw a great light pass over London a few days ago, and the other patients don't believe her. Amalia sits at the table to join them and is interested in Sarah's testimony. Sarah is saying she saw the spores come down from the ship, and Amalia tells Sarah she believes her. And we see on Sarah's face this makes her trust her more with an adorable smile, as no other patient believes her so far. Horatio comes to get True for her physical examination, and when Amalia first sees Horatio, she has a vision of the two of them sleeping together, which changes her entire attitude towards Horatio, and it's very funny. He thinks it's because he's a black doctor and is making her uncomfortable, and she tells him no, she's totally fine with him being her doctor. Let's get to work. Molly asks Horatio if there was any weird lights in the sky a few days ago. She asks if anyone, since the day she came out of the river, is better or more empathetic or smarter. The two are interrupted when a woman is slashing at the nurse in the asylum, which was the vision True had earlier. Molly is cut in the arm like in her vision, but manages to subdue the patient. Horatio brings her back into his office to fix her arm, and he is examining her as his hands begin to glow. He's taken aback, but True takes his hands and tells him it's okay, and he heals her arm. Amalia explains to Horatio what's been going on, and we get the best line in the entire episode. No, it makes sense. Aliens from the future gave us magical powers. This is such a good way to lighten the dense mythology of the show in a simplified way. One of the major problems I had with Lost was it was very rare when someone would make fun of the ridiculousness of the situation they were currently in, besides maybe a few moments where Hurley would try to explain time travel or get everyone to play golf on the island. I think that this is just an excellent writing technique, and it sort of reminds the audience, yes, this is weird, and viewers sometimes need to be reminded to have fun. It's okay to laugh at serious things, and it's okay to break the plot mysteriousness down to one simple line of dialogue. It sort of grounds the whole thing. Amalia says there has to be more people around with these weird symptoms after Horatio says he's only seen women have weird ailments since the night of the ship. She also mentions that the spores don't affect everyone that they hit, and she's never really understood exactly why. She also says they've never caused random powers like the one she's seeing here. Horatio mentions he doesn't think she is insane, but maybe the alien she is talking about is, and True says that would make sense since they were torturing it, which leads me back to the original theory I had at the end of Chapter 1, where I mentioned that this Galanthe is going off plan due to the torture and is kind of like, fuck it, let's do this and rage against the machine. As the two are reading the papers, Horatio deduces that these events are happening all over, people with strange afflictions, but True is confused as there is no one here that is empathically enhanced and expected to guide them and tell them what needs to change. Horatio insinuates that it's probably her, and she freaks out, saying she did her time and she's just a stripe, not here to lead anyone. Okay, so back to the Galanthe possibly being a little fucked in the head. Maybe it chose something like Stripe, who has the ability to instill hope in someone like it saw with Knitter, but didn't want to create another person that was artificially enhanced, if that makes sense. Maybe part of this Galanthe's plan is to use more of a natural human will to try to change the events of the future. Molly and Sarah are sitting at a table together, and it's a great scene where Molly is just talking to Sarah to practice her English accent. True is concerned Sarah might have said something about their mission and the lights to people that could be dangerous to them, and Sarah repeats, "I'm the one you trust to trust you back." Dr. Haig interrupts their conversation, saying he knows that the two of them are touched and that he's doing an experiment at his facility and would like a moment to speak with each of them. He speaks to Amalia first, and she tries to throw him off the trail, underplaying her ability to see the future. He presses her hard about the lights she's seen and catches her fake accent. In order to save herself, Amalia says it was all Sarah. She was going on about lights and God and saying that she had a mission. The word mission gets Dr. Haig intrigued, and he turns his sights on Sarah. Now, this is interesting because, yes, Amalia completely screwed over Sarah in this moment, and it made sense why Melody feels the way that she does in the first 5 episodes. From Amalia's point of view, she was just trying to get the focus off of her and get out of the asylum, throwing Sarah under the bus in the process, but it's not something she is, doing completely maliciously. It was just a moment in time, and it makes sense why she wouldn't remember this event 3 years later when Melody has both Penance and Mary hanging from the ceiling, attempting to get Amalia to choose between them. In another tragic moment, as we know what the Doctor's ultimate plan is, Amalia tells Sarah to tell the Doctor everything she saw, and thus, Malady was born. Then we get an awesome montage of True attempting to learn the proper etiquette of the Victorian era and practice her accent with another patient in an attempt to appear sane and cured to get out of the asylum. I love this moment, and the woman she practices with reminds me of some of the characters and the way they interact in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I loved it. We also have a great moment where one of the other patients, who is clearly touched and her fingers can turn into crab legs or something similar, has another patient by the throat, and Amalia is slowly talking her down, telling her this isn't what this talent is for, getting her to calm down, and comforting her with an embrace. Horatio and True are working together. Amalia is doing push-ups and trying to get her new body together. Horatio is sneaking her newspapers into the asylum, circling news articles that might have to do with the touch. Lavinia comes to visit Amalia in the asylum and tells her the review board said her release was exemplary, but since they found a stash of weapons under her bed, that her dismissal was denied. Lavinia says she is here to help True get out of the asylum and gives her the orphanage, believing she could have left the asylum months ago. Horatio and True have started to get jiggy with it and have a conversation about how True is finding ways to enjoy her new body as they both lay naked on the floor of the abandoned building that will soon be the orphanage. Lavinia has been giving True women they find who are touched, and Amalia tells Horatio a new girl is expected soon, one who builds things. Sadness, oh religion face. True has minor confidence in herself and says she's going to bring the world harmony and peace with slight sarcasm.
Chapter 4. True.
Immediately we cut to the battle we missed from last episode of True's mission down to the Galanthe. Can we comment on how Augie is, like, in the heat of it, by the way? I knew he was expected to use the birds as a distraction, but it was great seeing him here in the middle of the heat of battle with everyone. Go, Augie! In the middle of the battle, True falls into the ground beneath the drill, separating her from everyone. True makes it to the Galanthe and makes a joke about how it's still in the fucking ceiling, and it's cute, 'cause it's true, and it is. Amalia, alone with the Galanthe, gives an awesome monologue about how she doesn't know what to do next and has no set path for how to do it. She's like, I told everyone you're gonna save the world and save them, and that you're hope. She's absolutely in tears that the Galanthe would do this to her and everyone around her that she has to deal with, but won't answer her questions about what to do next, going so far as to blame herself. Was she the cause for this? Was her mess of a brain the reason that everything is different from the way it usually is with the spores? True even acknowledges at this point that Knitter would have been the correct person to bring back in time because she was a true believer. When True finishes her monologue, the floor begins to shake. This is the shaking that we heard and saw in the previous episode as Malady was being let out to hang. True is suddenly thrust back away from the Galanthe and experiences flashes of her own life in the future and Molly's life that we had just seen in Chapter 2. As we are brought into this memory montage, we enter a full-on memory of True telling Penance about who she is and what she fights for in the future, and enter the scene when Penance is responding back to her. Penance responds that it's upsetting the future is so grim and that there's nothing as nourishing as a life's work to change the future. If True was looking for someone like Knitter, someone that just believes they can change things, someone with more empathy than everyone that we've seen when she's risked everything to help Malady because it was the right thing to do, or the one that's the most empathetic, my money is on Penance. Now, I'm not saying Penance is the same person as Knitter or even is treated the same way in the eyes of the Galanthe plan, I guess, but it's just that she seems to show the most personality traits that describes this person that knows more and is supposed to lead personality that True was looking for in the asylum with Horatio. Then we are thrust back into the montage of people's faces, and we see the Beggar King, Malady, a man who is drowning that looks sort of like Swan as the Beggar King says, "You wanted a war, love?" Then a shot of Augie, a man saying, "Yes, I know what happened." Dr. Haig saying, "Did you think?" Then a woman's voice, "You were the only one that hitched a ride." We see the people Dr. Haig was experimenting on in the basement all running around in chaos while the Galanthe is turning orange in its sphere. Another shot of Malady, Masson aiming a gun. When he fires the gun, we see a very David Lynch-inspired, circle in a black void, and then a quick shot of the cyborgs fighting in the room with the Galanthe, driving directly onto the camera, and then finally, we see Myrtle, speaking in English and dressed in modern clothing, all in black in that same void of space with that circle. She says, "Oh, Amalia, this is a long time from that little cave. This I will need you to forget." And finally, the Galanthe egg explodes, and True hits the floor in silence. So, a lot of shit to unpack there, yeah? What I take from it is this. True is receiving Molly's memories and her own to join the two people in the beginning of the montage, then confirmation that Penance has known the entire time about True and her past, which was pretty obvious from the first 5 episodes, but we were all questioning it still. Then we hear Dr. Haig and a woman saying, "Do you think you were the only one that hitched a ride?" insinuating other full personalities came along back in time with her, and I just think that this explains what Lavinia and Dr. Haig are up to. They are both from the future, and actually a part of Free Life. Stripe mentions that Free Life owns history, which would put them in places of power, and I think this is why the Doctor knew that the one with the mission was the one to look for when he was questioning Sarah and True for the study in the asylum earlier, and why Lavinia mentions this is war when she sees the Galanthe in episode 2 at the end. The war is across all history of Earth now. Originally, I thought the flashes of people after the conversation with Penance moment were all hints at who came back with the Galanthe from the future alongside True. We saw Dr. Haig, Augie, Malady, the Beggar King, but then I finally realized when they showed the Galanthe turning orange and exploding that she was receiving images of the future, or more than likely she was. I've been scratching my head over and over about what the Myrtle moment meant in regards to the grander story and what exactly is happening here, that's what leads me to believe she was receiving some sort of image from the future, since Myrtle says, "This is way off from that little cave." She means the cave that True is currently inside talking to the Galanthe, and this is in reference to literally where Myrtle is currently positioned in this odd void vacuum of space. I take it that the Galanthe, using Myrtle's image, is speaking to True and saying, "Okay, this is your power. This is way far in the future, and this moment of me coming to you, I'm sorry, Amalia, but I need you to forget you saw me like this." Maybe the Galanthe is inside Myrtle, using her to sort of blend in and help the other touched through whatever it is it's trying to do. Keeping with the Galanthe is rogue theory, this might mean this Galanthe is going against what all the other Galanthe of its race actually want to do with the human race, seeing as how everything is off from the times it has happened before, or from what we know of it is off. Even more so, it might be hiding inside a small girl and finds it necessary that no one truly knows the plan or artificial hope, but manifests it inside themselves like an inception of sorts. I've been racking my brain over this segment for almost a week now, and I think this is the one that seems to make sense with all the pieces we currently have. Myrtle's message could have also been referring to everything that was shown to her in that montage, but I think that is unlikely personally. As why would she have forgot that warning of people coming back with her, or what would be the point of forgetting that? And when I first watched this, I thought, oh, that part is in reference to like, oh, here's the big fight, but I think True actually means, oh, that part of the vision I just received with the cyborg men jumping on me isn't as far in the future as I thought, which confirms she remembers a lot of the vision she was giving, and I think she only forgot the Myrtle Galanthe part. And then, not exactly as I called it, True is stuck inside the elevator, and it's not working during the fight, and the one touch that can make things float manages to make the elevator float to the surface. Wow. Sort of useless, but at least that little bit of foreshadowing was sort of used, and I appreciate how True managed to get out of the situation like this. But I can't help but think this girl is going to get destroyed by these guys, but I guess she's too mentally damaged from all the operations on her brain to, like, sort of realize. I don't know. I thought she was going to make, like, the ship float, but things have changed since the last video I did. True manages to fight her way to the surface, Augie takes out the last remaining guards, bird style, and True and the gang make their way back to the orphanage. We get a nice echo of Penance arriving back from her own mission and asking True how things went, only this time that fine True gives here is a lot heavier to say the least. The conversation continues, and True says she didn't find out who the enemy is, but she's glad Penance saved Malady, as it was the right thing to do, and Penance says, "But you did find something out," and True nods. The camera does this gorgeous pan around the two of them as they hold hands, staring at the group of damage touched in front of them, as True says it's time to tell them everything. The Galanthe, the future, and the fight that's coming. When the camera settles near True, she says softly, "My name is Zephyr," and I love the name so fucking much. It's interesting because Zephyr makes me think of like a flying ship or like a Zeppelin in history, and Zephyr was literally the ship that delivered the Galanthe and the touch to this time period. And Sarah also mentioned people were writing off the ship as a Zeppelin from another country when they were in an asylum. Zephyr, Alexis, Naveen. And then you add in the bomb-ass middle name and last name, and we get ourselves an awesome protagonist name right here. And then, in classic Joss Whedon show fashion, as the two women link arms, we see Penance's design that was teased at the end of the last episode, and it's a little Zeppelin with a rocket on the back. And as the camera pans away from the two of them, Penance says, "Fucking prototype," and the episode ends. I love that it ends with this line, and especially because I was dying to know what Penance had made and why so much time was kept keeping it a secret from the audience, and then I saw the way it was used, and it was a way to snap us back into this silly, funny world after a mostly heavy episode. It's also funny it's a Zeppelin, because Zephyr and flying ships. So I absolutely love the way these 6 episodes played out, and after seeing all 6, I believe this is like one long pilot for the show. Originally, at the end of episode 1, I thought season 1 was going to be finding Mary and getting the touch together, then episode 3 was revenging her death, then episode 5 was going to the Galanthe, and now finally, it is a fight for the future of humanity. As we all know at this point, Joss has left the show, hence the opening sketch. And after hearing many interviews about the actors and their process with creating the character of Zephyr, I am positive he designed the arc of these 6 episodes, and I am sad to see him go. I just am. I'm sorry, kill me, I'm sad to see him go. The show will either continue to be fun and engaging in the same way, and I hope that it is, as the show is written by a team closely associated with Joss, and none of them have left the show, even though we are getting a new showrunner in Philippa Goslett, who, well, let's just say the credits she does have doesn't include overseeing the arc of a series on HBO, and the credits she does have are movies with, well, sort of lukewarm receptions, but apparently she was chosen because she writes strong feminist pieces, so she gets a point there. The future of the show could either be an incredible 6-episode run that ends much like Firefly's short but beloved run, and then falter into madness, or, looking optimistically, they stick to the original plan and arc of the show that was very clearly thought about and planted right here. All I can really hope for is